So we're back and we're ready to take our form out of our clay shape here. So our clay has firmed up to the point where it's no longer super fresh and moist, but it is not drying too far towards leather hard. It's just firmed up enough that it won't be distorted when we're moving it around a little bit. Okay, so in order to take the form out of here so we can smooth the inside, what you don't want to do is try to grab the top and just pull both pieces out at once, because that will just vacuum seal the entire form and you won't be able to get it out. So just go ahead and take your newspaper and tear a little bit first. Get that to where you can see the form that you used, a can or a bottle. Go ahead and just gently grip, okay, and that will slide out of the newspaper. And then go ahead and take the inside edge of your newspaper and pull. And it should release. If you've got a little newspaper left in there, you can pull out the extra little scraps with a needle tool. Okay. Looking pretty good in there. Okay, so now we have this blank form that's like a fresh canvas. We can do anything we want to with that. So what I'm going to do is work on smoothing the rim and getting some of the canvas texture from where I rolled the slab out of there. Okay, so I've got a gently moistened sponge. Okay, don't want to introduce too much water to your project. Let's just soften it up a little bit here. Okay, I think I'm going to level the top just a little bit. Okay, so I've got a little point here where it's thick here, thin there. Cut off just a little bit. Okay. Go ahead and indent there. I'm going to rotate this on the rim. Keep the needle tool steady and level. This is one of those things I kind of make look easier than it is, I admit. You can also do this on a Lazy Susan or rotate it on some newspaper. Make sure your lines match up like that. Okay. I'll get out my banding wheel. Okay. Go ahead and just put the needle tool in the line that you just scored there. Carefully turn your project. And we'll get rid of any kind of rough stuff on the rim that you don't want. If you have any parts that pop up that aren't level, this is a good way to get rid of them too. Okay, so just push the needle tool all the way through, pushing with the side of the needle tool. So I'm not really cutting with the point, I'm cutting with the blunt edge of the tool. Remove that. Good. Okay, that looks a lot better. Okay, so I'm going to take my gently moistened sponge. I'm just smoothing down the sides here. I'm just working one direction, up and down. Even things out. Gives it a consistent look. Take our sponge. Remember we talked about in the first video, we want to have a nice lip on there that's not too sharp. So if I were to keep these raggedy bits, not smooth them in, or buff down this edge here, when that fired, I would have a very sandy and rough edge to lay against my mouth. So I want to make that nice and round. So the further along the clay gets towards leather hard, the more detailed smoothing you can do. Right now I'm just making this so it's symmetrical, doesn't have a lot of obvious bumps and finger marks. I'm smoothing out the rough bits. Okay. Let's take a look at the inside now. We're going to take a look inside here. We can still see little bits of creases, the scoring marks, some little rough bits in there. So at this point you can start to smooth those down a little bit. So the tool I like to use for smoothing on the inside of a mug is this carving tool. It's got a bit of a pointed edge on this side and has a tapered end that acts kind of like a thumb on the other end. You can also, if you've got parts that are difficult to reach, you can use a paintbrush and some slip. I'm going to take a little bit of slip on the end of a paintbrush here. Go ahead, take that paintbrush with slip, you can work it into the seam across the bottom. Okay, and you want to make sure you don't see any gaps or light shining through in that seam in the bottom there. So that is a place where it can crack or leak or liquid will come through. Go ahead and take the tapered end of your tool here and you can blend out the line of the seam on the inside from where we connected our slab of clay. We have a nice, coherent, consistent inside there. Blend those together. And worry about smoothing it a little more when it's a little further along in dryness. Right now we just want to weld those together. It's still moist enough to create a good bond. Okay, don't put too much slip on the bottom there because you don't want it to be rough even under the glaze. It can create kind of a sandy texture. I'm going to blend that down. Really paint that on there. I'm using a thicker slip so it doesn't get too runny in there. Remember, if you use really moist slip or use a lot of water on fresh clay, it can oversaturate your clay and make your project lose its shape. Okay, so now I can come in. And lastly, so I'm working from the bottom up the side to the top here. So I don't have to worry about distorting the work while I'm working on the inside. I'll take my moist sponge. Go ahead and round that off. Okay, good. So remember, these are handmade. It's not going to look like a machine made it. You can get it fairly consistent looking. If you want to, you can come in and shave little bits where it feels like it's a little too thick. I've got a little spot right here on the seam where it popped up just a little bit. I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm just going to shave off just enough to give it a little more of a consistent look with the rest of the rim. We're just going for broad strokes in the beginning here. A little cleanup, getting picky and fussy. We can save for more leather hard. Okay. At this point we've got a pretty good blank. So from here, it's still flexible enough that if you wanted to change the shape, put finger marks in there, make it into a more geometric shape, bulge the shape out a little bit. You can do a lot when you're at this stage. So say I wanted to round it a little more here. Take it from the inside, take my finger from the bottom, about a third of the way up, pressing with consistent pressure and rotating around, and giving it more of a belly on the bottom. So you don't need to just stick to the cylinder shape. So if you're making a sculptural mug to go with your quote, this is something you can think about after you create your blank, how you can press, pinch, add clay, subtract clay, carve away clay in order to create the image that you want out of the vessel that you're creating. Little places where it cracks, just go ahead and take your slip into those and just spackle. Okay, it's still at the stage where it's pretty forgiving. You can do a lot to it. So we can clean up the bottom there. Okay, so as I'm moving it around, I'm getting some distortion, some stuff going on with the bottom. Tap it, make it a little more level. Okay. So you can come around and even stuff like that out. Your needle tool. Your needle tool can do anything. Just come and just peel that the same way you would a piece of fruit. Go ahead and take off the excess that you don't need that's popping up. Take off a little bit at a time. Remember, it's always easier to take away clay rather than to need to add a lot on to even something out. Okay. So if you're making an organic form, you don't need to worry too much about things being too symmetrical. Just want to take a look and see how things are forming. They're looking even. I put it on a banding wheel or a Lazy Susan or a board that has loose newspaper on there. And turn it around slowly so you can see where it looks like it needs to come out a little more. Okay, so this end is a little flatter. You can come from behind and push that out a little more. Okay. So if your clay is very thin, you don't want to exaggerate that shape too much. If you push it out too much, you stretch the clay, and then you won't have enough clay to hold that shape. It'll get kind of thin, but I've got enough clay. I can go out about this far. Okay. Go. There we go. Okay. So from there, we go. It gives it kind of a pleasing and unique shape. Okay. So you don't necessarily need a pottery wheel to do functional ceramics. People have been making things out of clay to drink out of and eat out of without a pottery wheel for several centuries. We can definitely adapt our technology. Okay. Just be mindful of the stages of the clay. Okay. It's nice when you're working on ceramics to have, if you have a shoe box or anything where you can raise the level of your pottery so it's more at a level with your eyes. That's really helpful to see what you need to even out and work on. So when you just have kind of a top-down view of your work, it's easy to overlook little areas that may look okay from one perspective, but when you put it up where a viewer is naturally going to look at it, you can end up seeing all kinds of weird stuff. Refine the foot a little bit. I've turned it upside down. Taking my needle tool. Just working away at the pieces that are not that even looking. So remember, this part that we're working on now, we won't be glazing. So you want to clean that up just a little bit. So if we were to put glaze down in this area, it would drip down, stick to the bottom of our piece, and also stick our piece to the kiln shaft, which you do not want to have happen. So plan, making sure that your foot is nice and level, and this outside rim of the foot is pretty consistent looking, because everyone's going to see it. Make sure you blend out any kind of sharp edge. So once again, once things are fired, it's what you see is what you get. And your sharp edges will just be as sharp as they feel fired as they do when the clay is fresh. Okay. There we go. There we've got a mug with some personality there.